Hello everybody and welcome back to the Overrun. As usual, I am your host Chase Bierenkoven, and this week we are taking a look at the 2026 Hummer EV. The Hummer name has come to mean a lot of things over the years, and GMC has brought the name back to have another crack at recapturing the zeitgeist that this car had 20-some years ago. Now it's been revived and elevated to halo car status with more power, more ground clearance, and an all-new and very clever electric drivetrain. So this week we're going to attempt to find out exactly what the new Hummer has become and what the Hummer name has become after 4 years on sale. So I want to start talking I want to start discussing the Hummer EV's design with the fact that the design can change quite drastically given the car's height. Right now we have it in the highest suspension setting, extract mode, which obviously makes it quite tall. So you're guaranteed at least 16 inches of ground clearance, and I am on my tippy toes right now, and we are on a hill. That's how tall this thing is. It's literally taller than I am. Anyways, I want to bring you around the back so that you can see just how tall this thing is in extract mode. You certainly don't want to go driving it around in extract mode though, because the suspension becomes unbearably stiff. Both of us were bouncing around like rag dolls on the way up here in extract mode. Anyways, this is of course a truck, and it features GMC's clever little split tailgate design. So you can, wow, that's on some really strong hydraulics. Drop the tailgate like this to fit like really long items in here without risking them falling out the back of the truck, which is very clever. Of course, you can also just drop this like a standard trunk bed. Please note the Hummer EV badge. It comes down and then you can get into the bed. There's also a little step feature here, which perhaps would have been useful earlier. I think you have to go like that. So now you can actually step in instead of trying to pole vault like I did. Anyways, let's talk about the rest of the design, because there's quite a lot to go over actually. You have to be careful on the way down too. You might fall and break something. Let's move around the side. This car has the carbon fiber pack. That means that you get, among other things, carbon fiber wheels, mud terrain tires, which are ridiculous looking, of course, but I really want to point out the ludicrous double wishbone suspension and just how large the suspension module is for this car. I can't even fit my hand around the damper. Anyways, let's move a little further down the side. I want to point out a couple more things. I like this grippy running board stuff. It's like skateboard deck material, which is super nice. There's more Hummer badging, of course. The carbon pack gets you these carbon accented mirrors, which is very cool. And yes, it is real carbon fiber, in case you're wondering. Now let's go around the front, because I want to talk about the overall design of this car. I actually really like it. I think it's very cool. The ridiculous size notwithstanding, it's a very cool looking design. I love this like cutout right here. The way you can see the front wheels, even without the extract mode, you can see the front wheel tread pattern from the front of the car. I think that's very, very cool. There's also this Hummer badge, which is very cool looking. It's a part of the light bar, which you'll note also makes an H over here. That's kind of neat. Anyways, let's also talk about more storage, because there is quite a lot more storage. You'll have to wait there for a moment while I open the frunk. The button is actually right about at shoulder height right now. Again, just to show you how tall the car is. And the button is there. It's powered, of course. It's also huge. You could probably fit a me in there if you wanted to. Matter of fact, let's find out. This is the charging stuff that's like bolted in there. I'm gonna have to do another run jump here. Yes, even with some cargo, as you see, you can fit a me in here.
I'll kill you if you close this, Joby.
But you can fit a me in the frunk, and there's obviously quite a lot of room. There's also these bags here, which are used for storing the removable roof panels, which I'll show you now, once I climb off of Kilimanjaro here. Anyways, the roof panels come off. It's very easy. It's just like a Ford Bronco. I'll show you. You come in here, and there's some latches at the front and back of the roof. So what you'll do, once you're in, and getting in is, again, quite an event. You unlatch these, and then, very simply, whoa, you lift up, and they come off. And then when you want to put them back, you can just, you know, put them back. And then you close those latches, and that's it. All in all, I think it's a very cool looking design. It's obviously to the extreme, which is kind of the point of the Hummer, and it's the one time that the Hummer's vast array of extremes really manages to impress me. So in typical Hummer fashion, we're going to have to separate what is fact from what has become mythos. And that starts with the powertrain. Now this is the 3X trim, which means you get 2 electric motors on the front axle and 1 in the back. It's the most powerful Hummer that you can get. However, how powerful it is actually subject to a little bit of debate. Car and Driver, who does their own testing, says that this makes about 860 horsepower. Edmunds also does its own testing. They say 1,000. GMC, for its part, gives the most generous number. They claim 1,160 horsepower. And this truly is unbelievable, but they claim that this car makes 13,000 pounds-feet of torque. If that were actually true, I'm sure that when you hit the gas, you would start spinning the world backwards, a la Superman 2. What they're doing in actuality is they are measuring the torque output differently. It's still a factual figure. They're just using the math to help them make headlines. And so what this really makes by most people's math is less than 1,000 pounds-feet of torque, because the way you normally measure torque is by measuring it at the output shaft of the motor. However, the way that GMC does the math is that they measure wheel torque after all of the car's differentials, which if you're familiar with the way a bicycle works, it multiplies the amount of torque you apply through the gears. And GMC is doing the same thing here to arrive at that ridiculous 13,000 foot-pound figure. Suffice to say, the new Hummer is obviously ludicrously fast, and we'll get into that more later, but we did feel the need to clear that up. Just like the rest of the car, the battery on the Hummer EV is massive. It is a 170 kilowatt hour battery that in Edmunds range test nets 390 miles of range. That is, of course, a ridiculous figure coming from a similarly ridiculously sized battery. You've probably heard the statistic by now. The battery in this car, truck, Hummer, whatever, weighs as much as a brand new Honda Civic Si. And that is just about 3,000 pounds of this car's monstrous 9,000 pound plus curb weight. Anyways, if you do need to charge the battery, assuming you've somehow managed to run out of range, you'll be doing so via a slightly outdated CCS combo port. Of course, GM does provide an adapter for the new North American Charging Standard, or NACS, Tesla-style plug, which is handy because you'll be able to charge at nearby superchargers as well. So just like the exterior, the interior of the Hummer EV is ridiculous. The design is, I think the best adjective is monolithic. It is huge in here, everything is big. I mean, look at the width of the center console. It's got to be 1.5 feet wide. While I have you over here, I want to show you some of the cool graphics on this car. There are a couple for different modes. We'll cut in some B-roll of watts to freedom mode because you can only do it while driving, but that's a very cool looking graphic. The other very cool looking one is for crab walk mode. You push this button over here and hold it, and then on the center screen you'll see it does this very cool little thing. And that's it. And then it turns on the cameras. Now, crab walk mode shuffles the car on a slant, sort of like a crab would walk, hence the name. 2026 also introduces king crab mode, which basically moves the interior wheels at a higher rate than the outside. It's sort of like Mercedes, the G-Class EVs, their tank turn. It's a very similar mechanic designed to introduce more motion into the body of the car so that you can tighten the car's turning circle. Of course, with the rear steering, you get a lot of steering angle out of this car. GMC loves to brag that this has the same turning radius as a Chevrolet Bolt. They also do a little bit more bragging that I'm not such a huge fan of. GMC likes to tie this car to the moon landings. They do that because to make the Hummer EV was a moonshot for them. And so it's their way of sort of paying homage to the moon landings. Really what it looks to me like is that they're trying to put themselves on the same platform as the astronauts that went to the moon, which of course is a little bit performative and ridiculous, but there are some touches in here to sort of celebrate or acknowledge that fact. The biggest and most obvious one is on the doors. The door speaker features this cool geometric pattern. That pattern is actually a topographical map of the moon's surface where the astronauts landed all those years ago in 1969. Now, let's get back to some normal journalist stuff. How is this interior just to live with? There's a wireless charging pad here, some cup holders here, and a very large practical center console. All of that's great. These seats are actually very comfortable. However, this interior feels very cheap for $126,000. These air vents feel very plasticky and flimsy. You can see it's bending in my hand, just sitting there, which is, you know, not, well, yeah, listen to that. So the build quality is not great, especially for $126,000. This dash is like plastic over here. It's just not a very nice interior, especially at this price point, especially when you go to sit in something like a similarly priced Mercedes SUV of any variety. This thing really gets blown out of the water. Anyways, it's very cool in here. It's expansive, but it's also a very cheap feeling interior. And that's something that you're kind of going to have to contend with if you're into the Hummer. The back seats of the Hummer EV are decidedly more uneventful than the front. The same two-tone sort of clothy, leathery, plasticky material carries over here. There's also a couple of cool little storage compartments. There's a ton of door storage. There's also these compartments here. I don't know what you could keep in there, presumably something that you would like to hide from the authorities. Exactly what you need to hide the authorities is, of course, your business. Anyways, there's also a very large center armrest here, as well as a third seat, put some cups in there, etc. But this is by and large the same back seat spaces you would get in any large GM truck. That also means that you can flip these up, which is very nice because you have a little bit more floor storage space here. You can see that GM has decided to include the spare kit here. And you'll notice that geometric map of the moon, or I'm sorry, topographical map of the moon's surface carries over to the floor mats back here as well. And really, wow, that's it. I hate when we have to do this, but I have to start our driving segment with a little bit of an apology. Somewhere along the way during our off-road shoot today, we picked up what we think is maybe a little bit of a flat, and so we're not going to be able to do the Watts to Freedom mode like we had planned. We're going to try and get some air in the tire later, and maybe we'll be able to shoot it later, but I cannot guarantee you anything right now. It's obviously just not safe to launch an 1,000 horsepower car without proper tire pressures. So sorry about that, everybody. Hopefully we're able to remedy this and this gets cut out entirely. Anyways, let's talk about what it's like to actually drive the Hummer EV. Of course, starting with off-road driving. This car has one single problem as an off-roader. Its size, which will be a consistent theme throughout my driving notes, as I'm sure you're predicting. This car is very large, and there are some things that you can do to kind of shrink this car down a little bit. For one, you can enable the crab walk mode, which allows the car to kind of shuffle fore and aft to make it a little bit more maneuverable laterally. There's also a new, for 2026, king crab mode, which is activated via the same button on the side of the little drive mode wheel down here. And what that does is it turns the back wheels faster than the front. And so it virtually shrinks your turning radius as a result. It's sort of like the G-Class EV's tank turn. It's very neat, it's super cool, and it feels very, very weird to use. I have it on right now, and if you've ever ridden in like the tilt-a-whirl or the teacups at Disney, that kind of like swing that you feel when the cups turn is exactly what it feels like to turn the wheel when you're using this. It is a very odd, almost alienating experience. But of course, we should also talk about the ludicrous amount of power that this makes. Anywhere from 800 to 1100 horsepower, depending on who you ask, is a lot. And this feels like a lot. GMC claims that this will do 60 in 2.8 seconds. Now, I'm sure that that's on like a prepped surface and a drag strip, but it's still a 2.80 to 60 on mud tires. That's crazy. And this car is, of course, a car of hyperboles. It's a crazy car, and it definitely feels that way. You are so far above everyone, even in just the car's normal suspension ride height setting, to say nothing of the extract mode. It's ridiculous. It's also, of course, kind of hard to drive. Part of the reason we picked up the flat is because the car doesn't really fit anywhere, and so you might end up very limited in your selection of off-road trails as a result of this thing's size. This is a pretty big trail that we're on right now, and the Hummer EV fills it up entirely. We don't have room to move over for someone until there's a turnoff. You can't like just drive up the berm. The car is too big. That brings me to driving in the city. It's a nightmare, of course. It's an unmitigated nightmare. There are a million camera angles. Yeah, it's a little helpful, and yes, this does technically have a turning radius that is smaller than that of a Chevrolet Bolt. It doesn't matter because you still have to move the same physically large object through a small space. And driving this car is very much needle in a haystack in the city. It's also not particularly comfortable. This rides like a body-on-frame truck. I suspect the spring rates have to be incredibly stiff in order to support the weight of this 3,000-pound battery. On top of that, it just shudders and judders a lot over broken pavement. So if you live somewhere with crappy roads, this is going to feel like riding around in an old F-250. There's also a lot of road noise too, partially because of the detachable roof panels. And as a result, it suffers from the same issue as the Bronco. And as a result of the tires, there's just an obscene amount of tire on this car. And as a result, the tires make a lot of noise when they go over the pavement. So you have to put up with a lot to get the Hummer experience, but it is a cool experience to drive. It is kind of an experience to drive. Unfortunately, it just doesn't do a lot for me besides being very fast and capable off-road. I don't form an emotional connection with this thing at the end of the day. It's simply too large to be enjoyed. So with that, I think that's probably where I want to leave it. I want to discuss alternatives to the Hummer EV, and I use the word alternatives very carefully because I don't believe that there are competitors to this car. The Hummer EV, through its ridiculous hyperbole, really does stand alone. It is in a class of one. However, if you do want something like this, you can get close at Rivian. You can get an R1T, the truck, or an R1S, the SUV, with 4 electric motors, similar degrees of off-road capability, and more than 1,000 horsepower for right around the same money, $115,000 to about $129,000 MSRP. Now, this Hummer EV that you see sitting here is $126,000, and that is because of the $12,000 plus carbon fiber package that adds, among other very ridiculous carbon fiber accents, some carbon fiber wheels to this car that you definitely do not want to curb on a rock. Now, it's also worth acknowledging depreciation, because if you buy a car in a class of one, that means that there isn't really a healthy market to keep values afloat, and Hummer EVs have depreciated dramatically over the last few years. People went from paying more than $200,000 for these at launch to them being about $80,000 on the used market. So if you buy one of these, you definitely need to be aware that you are going to be in it for the long haul. And perhaps like the Hummer H1, it'll come back around and they'll start to appreciate again as people yearn for whatever zeitgeist this managed to capture. Stupid cars are fun. I love supercars, and they're stupid. They're bad cars. They're objectively bad cars, and that's what makes them fun. This is, objectively, kind of a bad car. Unfortunately, it also fails to elicit any real emotional response from me other than complete and utter disdain at this car's most blatant attempts to just be the most car. It's also failed in the 4 years since its introduction to capture any sort of real cultural zeitgeist. When the original Hummers came out, they were owned by celebrities and heads of state like LeBron James and Arnold Schwarzenegger. And LeBron and Arnold might go out and buy another Hummer EV, but they're not going to flaunt them in the way that they did 20 years ago, because people's attitudes towards this kind of car have shifted a lot in the last 20 years. And so what does that leave you? Well, it's fun to throw on the pit vipers and hit watts to freedom mode in a school zone every once in a while. The shine will wear off, and the gimmicks will too. They're very cool, they're very inventive, but they are at the end of the day just gimmicks, and they don't add anything meaningful to the experience. And so you're left just being Hummer guy. And whether that means backing down the trail because you can't fit, or backing over a parking meter in the Whole Foods lot, you're still just Hummer guy. And so I guess in that way, this is actually a very good Hummer. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time. Bye.